looking back the way that I was raised, it was very much my dad did a phenomenal job of how to work hard, not necessarily why you work hard. And so I think that really cascaded all the way through, through school and into college, into young adulthood, of if you want something, you go figure it out. You sort it out. I can remember one of the earliest stories was I was very interested in building cars, kind of 13, 14 years old. And so fortunately I was able to get an old truck, a 59 Chevy truck. And of course I needed parts to kind of get it running, get it restored, do some of those things. One of my earliest memories was I asked my dad, well, how do I get these parts? I remember him vividly walking into his office, getting out a big, gigantic yellow pages, put it on the table and said, here you go. That is an example of you're on your own. You sort it out. Use what you have around you to figure it out. And that lasted a long time around that being the default in my life of that. It's inside. I got to figure it out. I don't ask others for help and just dig in and do it yourself. It was very much about me. It was not about others at all. So what I can look back at is that individualism very much so drove a lot of bad behavior and treatment of other people, of which was not servant leadership, was not thinking about others before myself. It was very much, what am I going to do? What am I going to achieve? What's the next hill to go conquer and take? And so that really cascaded into every facet of life of just, me, I. And if I think about like a question it would be posed as, hey, are you living? Like what's living look like? I could look back very, very candidly and realize that I was not living. It was so tightly constrained and structured to where it was very much high output and high like return on time and like high finance coming out of that. But I can look back at it and realize like there was very little life, very low quality of life. And it happened to be a day, a piece of trash blew into our yard from across the street, and Dave came into the yard to pick it up. I'm like, this is the moment, this is the time. So asked Dave to disciple me, and in that discipleship, I have learned so much, and I can look through those early times with Dave. Is Dave tells a story of the whole thing is about grace. It's a redemptive story of grace. And so what that did for me in the context of humility was I am not sufficient. I do not have a pathway to salvation. I don't have it figured out. I am a dirty, dirty sinner. I have all these things really stacked up against the way that we are created and what we're made to do. And so Dave, in a very biblical way, broke that down and said, you have nothing else to do in this. You simply receive the gift. And so a lot of years were served with a really kind of rough exterior. And then over the years, there's very much focused on like breaking that down. Don't have to project anything. Being super comfortable in my own skin, knowing that God's created me in a very specific way towards leadership and towards leading my home, and just dropping all the stuff and reflecting Jesus.
A few years ago, or actually this was a few years before we planted Stonegate, so more than just a few years ago now. This was probably 17 years ago. So this is back in the late O's. Laura and I went to a marriage conference, and the pastor opened by asking this question. He said, how do you know how strong, how healthy, how vibrant your church is? How do you know? Now, there's a lot of things you could maybe fill in the blank with that. You could think about things that you might say in response to that question. But here's what he said that night. He said, here's how you know. You just take 20 random families in your church. You get to know those families. You get to test their spiritual vibrancy. You get to sort of test their spiritual health and strength. And now you know how strong your church is. And then he looked at the men in the room. And he said, how do you know how strong and healthy and vibrant your families are? And he looked at that room of people and he said, well, you just take the 20 men leading those 20 families, and those 20 men are going to tell you everything you need to know about the strength, the vitality, and the health of those families. I believe that to be true. I actually think that is so true. And when I look back at that season of my life, I really do feel like the Lord gave me the gift of those couple of sentences a couple of years before we planted Stonegate to really set the trajectory of our church family. Like what we're going to care about, what we're going to make sure we are instilling into the life of our church. We really do believe that as families go, so goes the church. And I really do believe that as men go, so go the family. Now, that really leads me to say the first thing I want to say to you. The first thing I just want to say, just by way of introduction to you tonight, is I want to look at all of the men in our church family and say to you, you matter. You really do matter. You matter way, 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 way more than you actually think you matter. You really do matter. And I feel like that's an important thing to say because our culture's not saying it to you. We live in a culture that is very unfriendly to men. Our world is very unfriendly to men. That is the sort of ethos that you and I are doing our life in right now. It is a very unfriendly world to this particular room. In her book, The Toxic War on Masculinity, Nancy Pearcey says this: no one can deny that the public rhetoric against men has grown increasingly harsh and bitter. If you listen to what is said about manhood, what is said toward men, you're going to know that's true. It has been increasingly harsh and bitter. When the American Psychological Association issued its first ever guidelines on counseling men, this was back in 2018, it denounced traditional masculinity ideology as psychologically harmful. Now just think about the implication of that. It is saying that traditional masculinity, men are going to be assertive. Men are going to take risk. Traditional masculinity, we might say it's normal masculinity, actual masculinity, even biblical masculinity in our world is seen as toxic. That is the world we're in. This world is not friendly toward men. The Washington Post ran an article by a gender studies professor, and here was the title of the article: "Why can't we hate men?" Question mark. But why can't we do that? The New Statesman, another magazine, it featured a British feminist who said, "You can't hate all men, can you?" Actually, you can. As a class of people, I hate men. A trendy hashtag for the last few years has been #KillAman. There you go. There it is. Or you can get one of those trendy shirts with the slogan, "So many men, so little ammunition." In late stage feminist sort of round three that we're in, the three most common phrases deployed against men right now in our culture are: smash the patriarchy. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Masculinity is toxic, and the future is female. There's your three big slogans of the day. Books recently have appeared with titles like "I Hate Men," "The End of Men," and "Are Men Necessary?" And some have they've come to the place of just saying, you know what? The age of men is over. We've had that day. I mean, it's like Lord of the Rings. We've had that day, and now it's another day, right? In her 2013 book, Hannah Rosen, she trumpeted that was the title of her book, "The End of Man." And it was an applauded book in 2013. This is the one that's going to be a bestseller in 2013. Universities are hotbeds of anti-male sentiment. An article in USA Today says, at today's university, masculinity is almost never discussed except in negative terms, usually with the word toxic attached to it. Even men have sort of been in on let's sort of diminish manhood. A male blogger wrote this: "Women have a right to hate men." Another male author wrote the book Refusing to Be a Man. And listen to what he says. He says, talking about healthy masculinity is like talking about healthy cancer. That's the world you're in right now. It is not friendly toward men. The best-selling science fiction writer Hugh Howey, he tweeted this: "Testosterone is the problem. Women should be in charge of everything. Jim McNamara, he is a researcher, and he did this extensive research on mass media and their portrayals of man. And he looked at 2,000 mass media portrayals of men, including this is news, this is articles, this is talk shows, this is all the things. And he found that more than 75% of all media representations of men portrayed them as villains, as aggressors, as perverts, and as womanizers. So I'm just trying to make the point that our world is not friendly toward men. So it's not hard to see why many men in our culture feel discouraged, devalued, and demoralized. Again, when Nancy Pearcey, she wrote a book called The Toxic War on Masculinity. Super helpful book. She is a teacher at Houston Christian University. And when she told her class, so just think about this. This is her class with a bunch of 20-year-old-ish men in it. When she told her class that she was writing a book on masculinity, one of the men shot back, "What's masculinity? It's been beaten out of us." That's the felt feeling of that 20-year-old sitting in that classroom at that university. So our world is not friendly to men. That is a true statement right now. It is not friendly to men, but our world needs strong men. And Jesus died to make you, the men of Stonegate, the strong men that this world needs. He has died to make you that. He came, he lived, he died, he rose from the dead to make you into the strong men that our world needs. Strong men, godly men, sacrificial men, responsible men, generous men, mature men, protective men. That is who Jesus has made you to be. Charles Spurgeon once said it this way: "When I say that a man in Christ is a man, I mean that if he is truly in Christ, he is therefore manly." There has got abroad a notion somehow that if you become a Christian, you must sink your manliness. That somehow becoming a Christian is going to feminize you. And God is not looking to feminize your masculinity. He's looking to redeem your masculinity. But he says that somehow you becoming a Christian is going to sink your manliness. And then he goes on to say, "Young men, to you, I would honestly say that I would be ashamed to speak of a religion that would make you soft, cowardly, effeminate, spiritless, so that you would be mere simpletons in business, having no souls of your own, the prey of every designing knave. Young men, I have tried the faith of Jesus Christ, and I have found it to give me what he calls pluck." That's an old Saxon word, but it's exactly what I mean, he says. It puts soul into a man, firmness into a man, resolution into a man, courage into man. That is what Jesus has died to put into you. Courage, resolution, firmness. That's what he has died to do for you, to make you. So now here is the moment when most pastors shift into, now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend the next few minutes berating men for everything they're not, as if a good berating will make you into the type of men that Jesus died to create in you and to bring about in you. So I just want to warn you here, I am not going to berate you tonight. I actually want to bless you tonight. I want to be one of the most encouraging, affirming voices in your life to remind you that I don't care how bad it's been, I don't care what kind of a mess you have made of your life, that you can become a strong, godly man. You can do that. By the grace of God, you can do that. You can become the type of world that our man needs. Not just that our world needs, but that your world needs. Like your wife needs, your kids need, your city needs, your neighborhood needs. You can become that type of man. So here's the verse I want to think through with you. It's 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. Here's Paul talking to the church in Corinth, and here's what he says to that church and to you and I today. "Be watchful," he says. "Stand firm in the faith. Act like men." If there's like an all caps thing I want you to see tonight, it's that. Act like men. He says, "Be strong." Verse 14, and let all that you do be done in love. The men of Stonegate, just hear this again from Paul. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Now, I just want to take that little phrase, act like men, and I want to show you 4 things the Bible says about that word man. Just to help us differentiate and sort of get some clarity on what is that? What is a man? What does it mean to be a godly biblical man? What is a man? Let me give you 4 things the Bible shows us. Number 1, the Bible shows us that men are not God. Men are not God. I love how the Bible begins. It starts like this. In the beginning, God. God is the first subject of the first sentence in the Bible, and he is that main subject of the first sentence because he's the main character, not just of Genesis 1 and not just of the Bible, but he's the main character of everything. Like everything is about God, amen? Everything is about God. The first line in the Bible introduces us to 2 sort of fundamental categories we've got to get when we look at the world that God has made. Here are the 2 fundamental categories. There is the creator, and then there's the creature. There's all the things that the creator has created. Those are the 2 categories. There's creator and creature. And so here's what we learn in the opening line of the Bible, that man is not ultimate, God is. That man is not everything, God is. That man is not to be worshiped and obeyed, God is. That man is not all wise, God is. That man is not all powerful, that God is. That man is not the point, but God is. That's the first thing we learn when we open the Bible. In the beginning, God. And that truth that we aren't God is the thing that inserts humility into a man's heart. It inserts humility right into the soul of a man. Humility is what happens when we see ourselves in light of who God is. When you see that you're not God, when you recognize that, that's when humility begins to grow in a human heart, in a man's heart. And that humility, that simple recognition that I am not God, it's what opens up everything else in the Christian life. Until you get that, you cannot confess your sin. Till you get that, you will not be known by other people. Until you get that, you will not look at another person and say, I was wrong. Until you get that, you will not look at another person and ask for forgiveness. You just won't do that until you have humility. It is the door through which everything else is explored in the Christian life. And it starts right there in the opening pages of the Bible that we are not God. A man is not God. Second thing we learn in the Bible is that men are not animals. Now, just think about animals for a moment. Animals live by their sort of base instincts. It's, I'm hungry, so I do something about that. I'm thirsty, so I do something about that. Sex, so I'm going to do something about that. This is how animals live. It's by these base instincts. Animals, you can maybe think of it this way. They don't have ordered instincts. That's not the way an animal works. It's with disordered instincts. It's whatever I want, that's what I'll have. It's whatever I feel next, that's what I'll do. And sadly, this is what sin can turn a man into. Sin makes people animalistic. It makes men animalistic. If you want to picture this in the Bible, think of Cain. Cain became a slave to sin, a slave to his anger, a slave to his desire, and he murders his brother Abel. Think of King David's son Amnon. Right, if you remember that story, he is a slave to his sexual desire and he ends up raping his sister. Right, this is sin turning a person animalistic. Or we could use Lord of the Rings imagery to show the deforming effects of sin. If you've seen Lord of the Rings and you've seen an orc, that is Tolkien's picture of what sin does to a person. It deforms us. It distorts us. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, when that guy's born, what is his mom thinking? I mean, that's a scary day right there, isn't it? But this is what sin does to a human being. It deforms and distorts us like this, where now we are ruled by our base instincts, disordered desires winning the day. Brutish, ugly, evil, totally ruled by what I want. And where sin makes us orcs, grace makes us into men with redeemed instincts. You are not meant to be an animal, amen? A man is not an animal. A man is meant to be redeemed by Jesus so that their instincts are now ordered. Their loves in their life are now ordered. It's Jesus, it's others, it's me. We're not controlled any longer by what do I want next? We're not controlled by that any longer. Now it's what does Jesus want next? Men are not animals. Thirdly, men are not women. Isn't it amazing that you have to say that today? Men are not women. But we live in a cultural moment where that distinction between men and women has been totally blurred. That's the day that we are in. There is no distinction between those two in our culture. One author is right when he says, in our time, defined manhood is bad and defined womanhood is bad. Just giving a definition of those in our culture is now culturally unacceptable. Defined manhood, defined womanhood is both bad. Bodily clarity is out, he says. Bodily confusion is in. By teaching and by intention, manhood and womanhood blur into one another. That is the day we're living in. These two concepts have been totally blurred. He goes on to finish, in the main, androgyny has replaced the binary. That is true. This is how our culture sees people now. So let's just take a trip back to the basics for a second. Can we do that? Men and women are both similar. We would all agree with this, right? This is the Bible looking at men and women and saying that they're both made in the image of God. They are both fully human and equal in that way. But at the same time, they are distinct at the most basic level. At the level of DNA, men and women are distinct. So let's get back into that biology class for a moment. Just think about how babies are made for a second. Moms bring an egg to the party, right? And moms are going to donate that one X chromosome, right? This is what a mom is contributing to a little baby in the womb. And then a dad brings sperm to the party, and it's a great party, right? So the dad brings sperm to the party. And when the dad brings that, what the dad is bringing is going to determine boy or girl. Right? This is how the biology of these things work. If the dad brings a Y, then guess what? You've got a boy, right? There's the YX sort of formation of a boy. And if he brings an X, then you've got a girl. There's your XX chromosomes. Now you've got a girl that's made. But those are the only two options. It is YX or XX. It is boy, it is girl. It is man, it is woman. Or as Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Those are the only two options that exist. Now, to know which one you are, you don't need a lot of degrees. You just need one mirror. That's it. That's all you need to know which of those two you are. So God makes both men and women because in their differences, we see something about our triune God, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in that distinctness between men and women. And God wants men to walk in their masculinity. And he wants our ladies to walk in their femininity. That is important to Jesus. It is important to God. In 1 Corinthians 11, Paul talks to the church in Corinth about head coverings. He's talking about the length of hair going on in the church in Corinth. And here is Paul's point in 1 Corinthians 11. His point is he's looking at the church and he's looking at the men and he is saying to the men, you should look like men. And he's looking at the women and he is saying to the women, lovingly, with a pastoral heart, you should look like a woman. This is what he's saying to the church in 1 Corinthians 11. So unless you're in Scotland and your name is William Wallace, you probably shouldn't wear a dress. This is Paul's point in 1 Corinthians 11. You probably shouldn't do that. He's saying you should cut your hair, you should wear clothes and carry yourself in a way that clearly says, I am a man and I'm not a woman. That is what Paul is communicating in 1 Corinthians 11. And according to Paul, I just want you to see this. This isn't like splitting hairs or something he's kind of on a hobby horse on. According to Paul, men carrying themselves in ways that are appropriate to men and women carrying themselves in ways that are appropriate to women, it's no small thing according to Paul. This is one way we stay faithful to Jesus. It's one way we show our faithfulness to Jesus. It's one way that we honor God and the way that he has made his world to work. All right, so we are not women. I love how one author says it. Embodied manhood, looking and acting like a man, is living doxology. When you as a man carry yourself as a man, he is saying you are worshiping God by doing that. When a woman carries herself like a woman, she is worshiping God. That is living doxology. Here's the third thing we learn about men. Men are not women. We're not God, right? We're not God, we are not animals, and we're not women. Here's the fourth thing we learn about men. Men are not boys. Men are not boys. Now remember, this passage is being read to the whole church there in Corinth. So he's reading to both men and women that are making up that congregation. This is a Sunday morning moment. The script has kind of been laid down before the church, and it's being publicly read over them. And the command to the whole church, men and women, is act like men. That'd be a little bit awkward if you were the woman in the room, right? So what is Paul saying when he says act like men? Right, he has both men and women in mind, and the primary distinction Paul is making is not between men and women in 1 Corinthians 16. That's not the primary distinction. It is between men and boys. It is between women and girls. It's between adults and kids. That's the main distinction that he is making here. The primary thing we should hear when we hear Paul say act like men is he's looking at men and saying, do not act like a boy. That's the primary thing he is saying. Now, if we go back a couple of chapters to 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 13. He says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Now, that needs to be like one of those core verses that every man needs written on their heart. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. In the scriptures, being a child or being childlike is really wonderful. It's applauded. Jesus says you can't be a Christian if you're not like one of these. So being childlike is really great. We want to keep that. But being childish, according to the Bible, is really bad. We want to kill that in us. We want to leave those things behind. Men, according to Paul here, are not boys. They've left those childish things behind. And so Paul is just alerting us to these sort of categories that we see in the Bible, that not all males have become men. There is a difference between these two things. You can be a male, even an old male, and still not be a man. There is a difference between being a male and a man. So we all need to know, every one of us in this room need to know, am I a male or am I a man? But which of those two define me? How do I grow into a man? What are those childish things that have to be left behind for me to put on manhood, biblical, strong, godly manhood? So for the rest of our time, I want to give you 5 shifts that have to happen in a male's life to become a man, in a boy's life to become an adult, a grown, strong, vibrant, rich man. 5 shifts that must happen for a boy to grow into a man. Here's the first shift. Shift number 1. Men get out of the middle. Men get out of the middle. Now think about what happens when a baby boy is born. They come out of the womb and they are the center of everything, aren't they? I mean, if you leave a baby alone for very long, they die. I mean, they're so needy and dependent upon everything. They are the middle. They are the center of everything. And little boys must be in the middle. They must be in the center of attention in those early years. But they should not stay there. They should not stay at the center of everything. If that male, that boy doesn't at some point gladly get out of the middle, if he stays in the center, if life is always about him, as if everyone else is meant to orbit around them, right? It's what he wants and when he wants it. If that transition never happens, he is going to be stuck in boyhood forever. Because men get out of the middle. A boy's life is all about them. A man's life is not about them. It is about God and other people. This is one of the defining characteristics of what it means to be a man. Childish boys, it's all about them. Men, it is about God and others. This is the first key shift. A man's life is not controlled by what he wants, but by what God wants. What will bless God? What will bless others? Just imagine for a moment if I got the 5 people that know you just the best. They know your daily life. They know how you operate. They know how you see the world. They know how you talk. They know you. And I had those 5 people right here on the stage beside me, and I asked them the question, has your name moved out of the middle? Is it all about them? Or have they moved out of the middle to make it all about God, all about other people? Does what they want rule the day, or does what God wants? Does what other people want? Does it rule the day? Are they selfish, or have they gotten out of the center of their life? I just want you to imagine your 5 closest people, probably your wife if you're married, maybe some of your kids, maybe a couple of your best friends, maybe it's a brother, maybe it's a sister, maybe it's a mom, a dad. If I got them on the stage and they're answering that question, how would they respond to that? Have they made that move? Have you made that move out of the middle? Friend, if your life is all about you, if you are at the center, if that's true of you, you are going to be enslaved to a million sins. You're going to be enslaved to them. You at the center will rip your life and the lives of everyone around you to shreds. But if you will get out of the middle, it's amazing how your life will open up. It's amazing the new things God will grow you into, the new ways He'll expand your life, the new joys, the new fruit, the new blessing that enters into the life that is no longer about them. This is how God has made you to operate as a man, not in the middle, putting God and other people in the middle. That is how He has made you to work. If your life is all about you, you have trapped yourself into a perpetual boyhood. But it doesn't have to be that way. Today, like in this moment, you can make that decision to step into more of the man that Jesus has called you to be. Godly, mature, strong. You can step out of the middle and become more of that man right now. Here's shift number 1. They have moved out of the middle. This is what men do. This is how we leave those childish things aside and we grow into becoming a man. Here's the second shift that must happen in every boy's life to become a man. Men do hard things. Men move out of the middle, and men do hard things. Again, this is one of the defining characteristics of what a man is versus what a boy is. So let's think about a boy for a second. Here is just one of the defining attributes of what it means to be a kid. Think about a 5-year-old kid, if they're in your house or my house or wherever they are. Here's what's true for a 5-year-old. Others make their life easy, right? I mean, a 5-year-old has a pretty good life, don't they? Generally, I mean, it's like everybody's doing everything for that 5-year-old, and rightfully so. Parents shouldn't look at their 5-year-old and be like, hey, you want to eat, you better get to work, right? That would be weird if parents did that, right? Parents are making their life easy for them. They're shouldering the load so that 5-year-old has room and space to grow up into a man, right? That's what's happening for them. Parents are doing those hard things to make the life of their kids easier. It's one of the defining characteristics about a boy's life. So here's the shift that every male must make to become a man. Men do hard things so that other people's lives become easier. This is what it means to be, like, welcome to manhood right here, right? It's a man does hard things so that other people's lives become easier. This is the call that God has put on your life. He has made you for that. He has made me to do that very thing, to do hard things so that other people's lives can be easier. And this is what Paul is getting at, just the hardness of what it means to be a man, to do hard things. In 1 Corinthians 16, when he says, be watchful. Now, just think about the imagery Paul is employing with those words, be watchful. The assumption underneath those words, be watchful, is you're at war. There is a war going on and you're in that war. That's the assumption under be watchful. This is why you have to be watchful. And if war is anything, if it's anything, it is hard. And one part of what makes war hard is constant watching. Every moment, every day, every second, you're watching. This is what's happening in a war. It's as if a man is always on the wall. He is always in that watchman position, looking for invaders, looking for anything that's trying to scale the wall and come into the city of their life to do harm to it. right? A man is always watching. He says you got to be watchful. Watching means that you stay wide awake to a real enemy that wants to destroy your life, your family's life, your kids' lives, your marriage, and everything else that's sacred to you. This is what it means to be watchful, to always be on alert. Be watchful, he says. You have an enemy that is out for those things. Imagine for a second if you knew out in that parking lot were 5 hungry lions, and we probably all aren't going to make it to our cars. Now just imagine how you would be walking out to your car. I mean, just imagine what you would do. I mean, you think you might be watchful? Yeah, I'd be really watchful if I knew 5 hungry lions were out there. And according to Peter, there really is a hungry lion out there. But his name is Satan. There really is a hungry lion out there, and he is looking for any way possible to kill you, to kill your marriage, to kill your kids, to kill your church, to kill your city, to kill everything that's sacred in this world. There really is a hungry lion. And if you knew that the real enemy was plotting to kill you, your family, your church, everything sacred, you would probably walk through your day in a little bit of a different way. And Paul is saying, yeah, this is what it means to act like a man, because men do hard things. They are always watchful. They are always vigilant. They're always on the wall looking for those things trying to kill them and other people that they love. They're always there being watchful. Men know they're at war. And when war comes, men are the first to run to the front line. This is what God has called you to be as a man. Oh, there's danger. Let me go get some of that. Before anyone else I love goes and gets them some of that, I'm going to go get some of that. This is the sort of hard things that God has called men to do and to move toward. I love how one author says it. He says, men have been made by God to stand down evil, to shoulder hard tasks, to lift heavy burdens, and to tackle desperate situations, all for the good of women and children. That is what God has made you for. That is the man Jesus died to create. This is the man that God has redeemed you to be. It is that type of man. In 2020, there was an Instagram post that just went crazy, and it was of a boy and his little sister. And they are cute, the little boy and the sister. But you don't notice their cuteness first. What you notice first is this massive gash right up the side of this little boy's face. And I think it's going to be on the screen for you. Yeah, see what you notice first there. Right, you're noticing that scar first, that gash first. That little boy's name is Bridger, and he was playing with his 4-year-old sister when a German shepherd came running at her. And he stood between that German shepherd and his sister, and that's what happened. Now, why did he do that? When he got out of the hospital, 90 stitches later, he told his dad why he did it. And this is what he said to his dad. I thought if someone should have to die, it should be me. Bridger is on his way to becoming a man. And that story resonated. It was shared millions of times on social media. Hollywood even got involved in this thing. The cast of Avengers sent him all sorts of gifts. Captain America himself sent him a shield, right? Now, why is that? Because when people see men, even 6-year-old men, when they see men doing what men are made to do, they sense something deeply right about that. That's why they do that. Men do hard things. This is what Paul is getting at when he says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith. Like, if you've got to stand firm in something, it means it's not going to be easy, right? That's the implication of standing firm. In other words, Paul is saying, here's the type of just way that God has made men, that they don't move. When things get hard, they stand there. They're not shaken by those hard things. Men do not move. When things get hard, they stand firm. One of my favorite moments of the last few years was the day when Russia invaded Ukraine. I don't know if y'all remember that day. That was a chaotic, crazy day. And the general consensus with Ukraine was that they were about to become Russia. That was the general consensus when it all went down. A couple 100,000 troops flood into Ukraine in 22, and the general consensus, just Ukraine's got no shot. They are about to run over this country, and anyone that is standing in opposition, like those political leaders in Ukraine, they are going to be dead if they stay there. That's the general consensus going on. And if you remember that day, President Zelensky and his key leaders, on the day this was the night that invasion happened, they got into the street of the Capitol. And on the streets of the Capitol, they shot a video. I think I've got a picture of it up here of just them capturing this video. And this is essentially what he says. He says, "Good evening, everyone. Your leaders are here. I'm here. The Prime Minister is here. Our military is here. We are here, and we are defending our country and our independence, and it's going to stay this way. Glory to Ukraine." That's an amazing moment, isn't it? When the U.S. offered to airlift him out of Kiev, he said, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." Now, I don't know Zelensky. I have no idea about his personal life, but I know this. That is how God has created a man to operate. This is the type of hard things God has created men to do. Men do hard things even when it might be the very last thing they do. Men do hard things. So can I ask you a question? What is the next hard thing God is putting in front of you? Boys shy away from that thing. Males want nothing to do with that thing. Men look at that thing and they bear hug it. Men look at that thing and they move toward it. What's the next hard thing Jesus has in front of you? Maybe that's in your marriage. I don't know where that is. What's the next hard thing? This is what God is asking you to do, for you to step toward that hard thing. You know, one of the hardest things to do in all of our lives is just to be honest with ourselves about our life. To be honest with God and ourselves, to name the problems in our life, and then to do the necessary hard work in seeing those areas redeemed. Putting the grit in to see those areas change in our life. This is what's probably the hardest thing for all of us in the room, is naming those problems and then doing that necessary hard work of killing these things, of putting these things to death so that better things can flourish in our life. For instance, I enjoy a good bourbon. I don't know if you do. I enjoy a good bourbon. That's an easy thing to enjoy though, isn't it? That's not a hard thing to enjoy. What is hard is honesty. It's looking at that glass of bourbon and saying, I have a problem with bourbon. That's a lot harder thing to do. And friend, if you are finding yourself with a glass of bourbon 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week, you probably got a problem. If you are hearing a voice that's that one more, give me one more voice that's really loud and winning, it is telling you that you have a problem. And here's one of the hardest things for men to do, is to look at that problem and honestly name it. I have a problem. Other people don't have to tell me I have a problem. I'm looking at it and I'm being honest with myself and God and naming that's a problem, and then I'm doing that necessary hard work of seeing that problem get put to death. I enjoy good food. I don't know if you enjoy good food. Is a steak not an amazing thing? I mean, it is unbelievable how good a steak is. It's not hard to enjoy food. It's easy to do that. Who doesn't like food? But here is what's hard. What is hard is looking at your life and admitting, my weight and fitness have fallen into the abyss. I need to name that, and then I need to do the necessary hard work of doing something about that. That is hard. And my question to you is, what hard thing is in front of you? Maybe it's a problem that God just wants you to name tonight. And then put in that necessary hard work to see the grace of God redeem, put to death that thing going on in your life. What's the next hard thing for you? And let me just give you this practical encouragement. You train yourself to do hard things by doing hard things. This is how it works. This is how you become good at doing hard things, is you do hard things. And I would just encourage you in every season of your life to have something hard in front of you. It may not even be spiritual per se, but it's a hard thing in front of you. We try to do consistent family meetings at our house, and this is one of the things that we talked about just this last week in one of our family meetings of everybody's got to find one thing that's really hard for them to do by the end of the year. Laura is running a marathon before the year's over. All the kids and I look at each other and we're like, I guess we're going to run a half marathon then. So I guess I'm running a half marathon before the year's over. But it's just finding a hard thing for you to do, because here's how you learn how to do hard things. How you train yourself for hard things is by doing hard things in your life. In every season of your life, find hard things to do to train yourself so that you'll be ready to do the next hard thing that the Lord puts in front of you. And what is that thing that the Lord has in front of you that's hard? Friend, God is looking at you and saying, I have made you to shoulder that load and to step into that hard thing. Men do hard things. Here's the third thing we learn about those shifts, the third shift. Men do hard things and men are strong. Men are strong. Act like men, Paul says. Be strong. Now, Paul was picking up on some language that we find in the Old Testament. If you go all the way back to 1 Kings chapter 2, David is dying. And as he is dying, he just in a sacred moment, he brings his son Solomon to his side, and he says some words over his son right before he dies. And this is what he says to Solomon. He says, Solomon, I'm about to go the way of the earth. Now just imagine this. He's dying, and he looks at his son, and he says to his son, be strong, Solomon, and show yourself a man. I hope you get the chance to say that to your son before you die one day. Be strong and show yourself a man. Now, he is saying here that part of what it means to be a man is you show yourself strong. This is what men do. They show themselves strong in their life. Now, the question is, what kind of strength is David talking about, is Paul talking about here? What does it mean to show yourself strong? Here's the answer. Show yourself strong. Show yourself to be a man. Here's what strong is. Keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. Can you see what strength is in this text? Here's strength. Strength is faithfully obeying Jesus, especially when you don't want to. That's what it means to be strong. And men are strong. God has made you to be strong, to faithfully obey Jesus, especially when you don't want to. It doesn't take a strong man to obey Jesus when you feel like it. Just like it doesn't take a strong man to go into the weight room when you feel like it. Here's when it takes a strong man to do hard things, is when you don't feel like it. That's when it takes a strong person, a strong man. So maybe we could say it this way. Real strength is the ability to deny yourself, to faithfully obey Jesus even when you don't want to, when everything in you is saying, I want to do this, not that. That is the moment strength shows itself. It's faithfully obeying Jesus, especially when you don't feel like it. Real strength is that ability to deny self, or as Jesus says in Luke 9, if anyone would come after me, here's what it's going to mean. You're going to have to deny self. There's going to be daily self-denial as a part of what it means to follow Jesus. And this is one of those things that separates boys from men, males from men. Boys say yes to every impulse. This is what kids have the liberty to do in their life. Just whatever's in front of them, they're going to say yes to that thing. If you want a boy in a man's body in the Bible, just look to Samson. He is your boy in a man's body. He was all impulse. I want a Philistine wife. I'm going to have one because what I want is what I do. And friend, today you can take a step into godly, robust, strong manhood by doing this very thing, stepping out of the center of your life, stepping out of what I want, what I always get, and know it's giving Jesus your life. It's giving that yes to Jesus. Men kill their fleshly impulses. All of those impulses running away from Jesus, men say no to those things. Maybe you could, if you want a picture of what it looks like to deny self, here it is. My flesh wants this, Jesus wants that. Here is what self-denial is. It is siding with Jesus against yourself. And this is normative Christianity. Jesus is saying this is like daily, by the minute, what it means to follow me. It's siding with Jesus against you. Boys don't do that. Men, godly men do. They side against themselves and with Jesus. I want to look at pornography. Boys say yes to every impulse. Men side against themselves and with Jesus. I want another drink. Men side with Jesus against themselves. I want another plate of food. Men side against themselves and with Jesus. This is just what it means to be a godly man. I want to buy another thing. And men side against themselves and they side with Jesus. And here's the truth about our culture. It trains people to say yes to every impulse. That's kind of the ethos of our culture, right? Say yes to everything, because saying yes to everything is the way to happiness. If you embrace everything you want, you're going to find your authentic you. No, you're not going to find the authentic you. You're going to find an orc at the end of that road, right? That's what's at the end of that. When you say yes to every impulse, men are strong, and that strength shows itself in self-denial. Siding with Jesus against ourselves. So where do you need to practice self-denial? If you were just tonight going to say, you know what, I want to take a step toward being a more godly, mature, whole man, then you just need to answer that question. Where can I practice self-denial today? Where am I giving in to fleshy impulses? Siding with me and against Jesus? And where is Jesus looking at me and saying, no more of that, right? I've made you to be strong. That's what I've made you to be. So I want you to side against yourself and with me. Where do you need to practice self-denial? Number 4, the fourth shift, is men take responsibility. Men take responsibility. Here is the difference between a boy and a man. Boys let other people take responsibility for them. Men take responsibility for themselves and then for others. This is what it means to be a whole, strong, godly man, is you have taken responsibility for yourself and then for others. Men, godly men, they make commitments. They make commitments to people and to places and to causes, and then they follow through on those commitments. Men say, I do with their lips, and then they say, I do with their lives, and how they follow through with what they've just said with their lips. Men, godly men, mature men, strong men, say, I do to a lady. And then for the rest of their lives, they follow through on that I do. Godly men say, I do to their kids. And then for the rest of their life, they prove that I do to be true. Godly men say, I do to a church. And then they follow through with their lives on that commitment, on that I do. They say I do to some type of work in their life, fruitful work, meaningful work in their life, and they follow through by giving their life to that work. And then they find some evils and some injustices in the world, and they say I do to killing those injustices so that people can thrive that aren't thriving. This is what godly men do. I love how one guy used to say it. He said it like this: men are like trucks. They drive better with a load. And that's true. Men are built like trucks in this way. They do better with a lot of weight in the back of that truck. And when a man says, I do, they put weight, they put a load in the back of that truck so the truck can now drive straight in their life. And research is actually showing this to be true. Listen to this. There was a large body of research done that demonstrated when men are engaged in helping rear their children, they are more likely to behave in pro-social ways. They are less likely to commit crimes. They are less likely to be violent. They are less likely to drink alcohol, consume drugs. Fatherhood seems to channel male energy and aggression toward constructive and pro-social ends. Indeed, across cultures, becoming a father has been observed to lead men to become less selfish and more socially responsible. Becoming a father can generate a powerful motivation for a man to provide for his children and behave in pro-social ways. That's just research demonstrating what the Bible is saying. That men are built to carry a load. They really are like that pickup. Maybe you could think of it this way. Real commitments to real people is what grows a person up. This is what grows you up, making real commitments to real people, giving real I-dos to people, and then letting your life follow through on that idea. This is what grows boys into men. Now, I just want to stop and address our young men in the room. Those who were standing earlier, I just want to say a quick word to you. I want to just tell you how to get ahead in life. Okay, so if you're 18 and under, let me just say how to get ahead in life. This is the way you do it. The sooner you start taking responsibility, the further ahead you're going to get. I'm going to say it one more time to you. The sooner you start taking responsibility, the further ahead you're going to get in life. So you should be looking at your life right now and asking the question, what can I take responsibility for? What can I own in my life and be responsible for that thing? This is Genesis chapter 2, right? If you think about what God does for man, in Genesis 2, he creates man, and then he looks at the man and he gives the man a job to work and keep the garden. That's God's way of saying, you are responsible, man, for the garden. God has built men to be responsible for things. A good way to think about manhood is we are keepers of the garden. God has looked at man and he's saying, you're responsible to help things around you flourish, to defend these things so that no enemy invader gets to come in there and destroy the garden. You are keepers of the garden. You are responsible, right? This is what it means to be a man. You're responsible for the garden, to care for and cultivate the garden, to help it flourish, to protect it against everything that would want to destroy it. So if you are 18 and under, it starts with your room. You probably need to make your bed. You probably need, yeah. And every dad's like, yep. And dads, you probably need to make your bed. So to our 18 and unders, it starts with your room. Can you exercise dominion in your area and help it flourish? Can you do that? It's gonna be really hard to change the world if you can't keep your room clean, right? So it starts in your room. Then it goes to your body. To work and keep the garden of your body by staying strong and fit. And then it goes to your mind, to work and keep the garden of your mind by applying yourself in school. And then I would ask your dad for ways that you can keep your house. Maybe it's you are the guy that's gonna keep the lawn. Every man in the room would be amen to that. I'm looking for one of those guys around my house right now, right? So maybe it's you keeping the lawn and you figuring out, how do I help that little garden of the lawn flourish? How do I protect it from things that are gonna try to invade it and kill it all? How do I do that? This is how you get ahead in life. You start looking at your life in a way that most 13-year-olds don't look at it. The way most 15-year-olds don't look at it, the way most 18-year-olds, the way the most 50-year-olds don't look at it, and you start looking at your life and saying, how can I be responsible for some things? How can I cultivate and create some things here? How can I defend and protect some things? How can I be responsible? This is what it means to be a man. We take responsibility. And men, where do you need to exercise dominion? Where is your garden languishing right now? Maybe it's the garden of your marriage, of your parenting, of your body, of your mind. But where is your garden need tending to? Where do you need to take responsibility in your life? This is what men do. This separates boys from men, males from men. Men take responsibility, and then we'll end here. Men live for what matters most. This is the fifth shift. Men live for what matters most. Boys live for the next thrill. Men live for what matters. That's what God has called you to live for things that matter in this life. God has made you to give your life to things that are meaningful. Your life will feel meaningless to you if you give it to meaningless things. Conquering Call of Duty is not going to give you meaning. And there's a million other illustrations of that. You're going to feel meaningless if you don't give your life to meaningful things. And to our teenagers, I just want to talk to our young men one more time. Our culture has sold all of our teenagers a lie that these years don't matter. So just go berserk and go crazy. Waste these years and you can get around to like life later on. That is the lie that our culture sells teenagers. This is your time to like sow those wild oats and like boys are gonna be boys and you just go berserk. And that's not true. If you are a teenager in this room, your life matters. It matters so much. These are the years you are preparing yourself to be a man. You are on that trajectory. You are moving toward manhood. That's what these years are for you to take responsibility for things and learn how to be a man. These years are so valuable in your life. And to our men in the room, where do you need to step into more meaningful things? Your life really does matter. Our world is telling you that men don't matter, that your lives don't matter, and it's not true. Your life, you giving your life to meaningful things is the most meaningful thing. Starting with God, you giving your life to Him and His causes in the world. Men, as you go, so goes your family. And as your family goes, so goes the church. And as the church goes, so goes the world. That is how important your life is. That you're giving it to meaningful things. Our world is not friendly to men, but it needs strong, mature men, and that is the type of man God has made you to be, men of Stonegate. So let me just finish with this. Friends, we are going to blink another time or two, and we are going to be standing before King Jesus. So why wouldn't we give our life now to the things that are going to matter then? That we're going to want to present to Jesus and give to Jesus then? But why wouldn't we live for those things? So may every one of us ask the Lord to fill our hearts with vision for how to give our life to those meaningful things that will matter one day in the end. Men of Stonegate, be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. And let everything you do be done in love. Father, would you help us lean into that? Live into that? Father, would you fill our hearts with hope and vision and belief that you can make us into strong, mature, godly men? Doesn't matter how bad it's been, how foolish we've been, that today we can start growing into the men that you died to make us. And God, I pray that tonight would be a little seed in our hearts that would grow into hundreds of oak trees around Stonegate, where others can get under those branches and under those leaves and be defended, protected. They can be blessed and encouraged. God, would you make us into those type of men? And it's in your good name that we ask it. Amen.